Welcome to another episode of Management Unfiltered. My name is Kirk Teachout, and I have the gem in coaching and dental, uh, coaching, consulting, whatever you want to call it. Kelly Schwartz here. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kirk.
Yeah. Hey, man, I am so glad you're here because, man, this guy, I've only met him once, but he is a big personality, very big personality in coaching and also dental in general. But he's, to me, almost a hidden gem. Like, works with so many people, but is more behind the scenes, not really at the forefront of these like massive speakers you see at conferences and stuff. But you've accomplished so much. 30 years experience in dental, or over 30 years experience with you and your wife in dental. You have worked with over 850 clients, which is insane. Insane. That's awesome. I'm at like I think 120. So, in 3 years. So, you know, that's a testament though. And not only that, you have been the first and last coach for some of your clients over the 30 years, which to me speaks to your knowledge, your product, your value. And that's what this is all about, right? Is giving value. So today, me and Kelly are going to dive in. Zach had an appointment he had to go to with his wife. So I want us to dive deep just right out the gate. I wanted, why did you get into dentistry, first of all, Kelly?
So I was a corporate trainer for Marriott Hotels and Resorts, of all things. Went in, I would open up hotels, put in Marriott systems and so forth. Um, I opened the New York Marriott Marquis, the Atlanta Marquis, Orlando Trade World Center, and then I did a few other properties as well. And I'd go in and do all the hiring, training on Marriott systems. And one of the gentlemen who worked for me, his brother-in-law had a dental consulting firm in Dallas, and they approached me because they were having trouble being consistent with their systems as trainer, and that was my specialty. Didn't know a whole lot about dentistry other than you win every 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And so
Maybe.
yeah. I had to ask my mom one time when I was in high school. I'm like, Mom, I don't remember going to the dentist in high school. She's like, I don't think you did.
Yeah.
Uh, but they hired me in, and I started to work with them, and just learned dentistry from the inside out. That's kind of how we got into it. And so my expertise in systems and follow up and hospitality and all those kind of things just blended really into dentistry, because dentistry, as you know, is just not about clinical. It's about people, right? Motivating your teams, motivating your patients, those types of things. And I had that natural skill set. So my college roommate's wife was a hygienist for a practice up in Michigan. She introduced me to her doctor. I met with him. He introduced me to a friend of his. They became my first two clients up in Charlevoix and Pellston, Michigan, the middle of nowhere. And they were my first clients. And from there, the rest is history.
That's super cool. And I know like we yapped a little bit beforehand, talking about how you were like before the internet, you were just on the road going 10 miles one way, 10 miles the other way, knocking on every single door. Like I am so thankful for the internet. I would not do that. I'll just be honest. Like I would not be where I am right now if it wasn't for the internet. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
But
guerrilla marketing, I don't wish on anybody.
yeah, no, that is so tough. I mean, because to be honest, like I was always, especially as the office manager for my wife's practice, I'm always the filter for people getting to the doctor, right?
Yeah, gatekeeper.
So, if a rep comes in and they're just transactional, you can tell that right off the bat, they're not getting through. Like, they've got to build a relationship. They've got to bring chocolates. They got to do something, right? So I can,
I got to tell you a quick story on that.
yeah,
I
sure.
In my cold calling, I had this one lady. I walked in. She said to me right away, "Whatever you're selling, I don't want any." That was the first thing she said when I walked in the door. And I was like, "Well, how do you know I'm selling things?" She goes, "You just look like that type." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm really sorry." So Anna and I ran out to our car, ran up the street, we grabbed a bunch of chocolate bars, came back, and brought a chocolate bars. And it's like, "It looks like you're having a bad day. Yes, I wanted to sell, but here's a chocolate bar. Have a good day." So about 2 years later, I'm doing a lecture, and this one lady in one of the Q&A, she said, "Yeah, I had a couple years ago, I had this person walk in and brought me back chocolate bars." And it was funny because it was that lady. She didn't even remember it was me, but she was that type. So yeah, don't wish guerrilla marketing on anyone.
Oh man, no, I hate outbound. It's such a hard thing, and it is a way.
It's not today. Yeah, not today.
This episode, I want us to just dive deep, from coach to coach, and look at some of these practices we work with. What are some of their successful traits? What are some of their failures, and how we've been able to take them through those? Whether it be leadership, whether it be tactical. I just want to dive deep and just dive right in. So I'm going to ask you the first question, and we're just going to really see, like, every coach that comes to you, every consultant that comes to you, they have that like gold practice standard that it's like, oh, if everybody was like this, and that's what we use in our marketing, that's, it's like, oh, well, you can see all of this results from everything we do, right? But that's never the way it works. So what is the single most dramatic turnaround that you have seen, the practice that had no business making it and somehow did?
One comes to mind, was an office in Charleston, at a really small practice, one assistant, one hygienist, one front desk, doing around 650. And we flew down, at the time I was in Michigan, flew down to Charleston, met with them. And after the second day, the doctor said, "What do you think?" And I had to bite my tongue for a second think. And I said, "What I think is we wasted 2 days and you need a whole new staff." Now, I'm not one to tell the doctor who to hire, who to fire. I'm only sharing this from a standpoint, but your staff just doesn't have any energy, any enthusiasm. They don't, they're punching the clock. So when he and I went out to dinner that night, talked to him, I said, "Look, you need a team. If this is your team, they need to change their energy and be willing to serve the patient," right? Because they were just going through the motions. Well, in the process and the systems we implemented, helping him find the right people, we did keep one of the three. She had the right attitude. She just was around the wrong people. But once he had the right staff, that practice last year sold for 4.6 million. They quadrupled in size. They implemented all of our systems over the years, and we coached them for a good 14 years. Now, I want to be real clear. It's not about hiring or firing the teams, right? It's about everybody who works on your team needs to have the right attitude, and that they want to service the patient. They want to create an experience where your patient wants to come back. So if you take a team that isn't patient focused and doesn't have systems direction or leadership by the doctor, you turn those systems around, you're going to see results.
Well, I want to touch on that too. You said leadership, right? And that practice being 650,000 a year. The difference between what I've seen anyway, and I'm sure you can attest to this, the difference between a $650,000 practice and $1 million practice is leadership.
It is.
It's 100%
You should
leadership.
be able to do 650 by just opening the door and answering the phone.
Right, right. So now if you want to jump to that next level of $1 million practice, which is where the most overhead you're going to see is in, then that's leadership. And then from the million to 3 million, like that's systems and scale in addition to leadership, but like it's not so much the systems. The systems just make it easier,
Right.
right? So that's a good story because it's very similar to, I think, to what like I guess what I've seen the dramatic turnaround with my client is too, is like a practice in Arkansas that he was in the negative, in the red for like 8 months straight,
Yeah.
and was willing to just like basically shut it down.
They were barely paying bills.
Yeah, it was like, but he was willing to shut down and just like become a history teacher.
Yeah.
Like he did not want to be in dental anymore.
Sure.
And after having a workshop with him and his team, just for a couple hours, right, of allowing them to see what the goal is, what the vision is for the practice, and just kind of how to do that, he had the reins. We set up a bonus system for that next week, a number that had never been done. And they hit the bonus 3 out of 4 of those days. And now like is profiting, 60, 80 grand a month. And it's like, okay, cool. Like this is what it is. And ever so often he's like, I don't want to have this tough conversation, but I remember how it was. And I know I need to have that tough conversation in order to keep it the way it is. I'm like, yeah.
The team really have to know your direction, but the systems are part of your leadership. This is what I expect. I expect this to be done for recall. I expect this to be done for unscheduled treatment. I expect cancellation and no-shows to be handled this way. I expect our patient interaction to be handled this. But one of the traits, this may be something you haven't heard, but have you ever heard of the word fellowship? So good leadership involves great fellowship. In other words, you lead your team, give them the tools and the systems that they want, and then you allow them to pull you to success. And as you mentioned, with having a bonus, the team have to own the practice. So one of the first things we teach is we teach job stewardship versus job description. Job description is a list of things you need to do. Job stewardship is what you take ownership of. So we make them owners in the success of the practice. Then we give them a formula. A lot of people call it a bonus. I call it a share of the profit. But we give them an ownership that the better we do, the better they will do. So the only way as an owner of the practice I'm going to do better is if my team does better. But it's got to be a win-win. I'm not a big fan of individual bonuses because then you become me focused, not we focused. But yeah, but having that leadership, training your leaders the way you want them to be, and then follow them to success and course correct when you need to.
Well, and that's something important to tack on too. You said we focus. Our the bonus systems that I implement aren't individual either.
Right.
They're team based because yeah, I mean every cog in the wheel is important, and if something's not right in the front, then they could have it closed in the back all day, but if it's not scheduled, it's not closed, right? So the same with hygiene, same with the assistants and the doctors. Like if we don't work together as a team, then we're all gonna not be successful.
The teams need to be good business partners. They need to understand the goals and how they tie to collections, how that ties to salaries and so forth. But I've seen teams, they have department bonuses, and one team that will hit a bonus, but the rest of the team doesn't, and the practice loses money, but the doctor's still paying a bonus. And that can be negative. So to have a good leadership and to have good teams, you got to be really clear on your direction. And I'm a big believer about setting goals for lifestyle, not for the practice. So what is it going to take to give the team more days off or insurance, or what is it going to take to be able to give the team what they want, and in turn, as an owner, I get what I want. And the only way we're going to do that is give the patients what they want. And Zig Ziglar says it best: help enough people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want.
And so I just posted the video of Jim Rohn quoting Zig Ziglar, right? Of him saying, if you can give give somebody everything they want, then you will have everything you want. And he underlined everything, right?
Yep.
It's like, yeah, I mean it's so true. And I think that's, to testament of your program too, is like being able to do it for so long is a testament to being able to give everybody that you come across, or at least the majority, the value they need to have everything that they need, so that way you can as well. And I want to pivot just a little bit because something I've run across lately, like me and my wife, we're a husband wife team.
Right. Me too.
I had right. So um, this weekend at my retreat in Utah, we had two or three husband and wife teams, which was really fun because I haven't come across it a ton, but I know it's out there. So I I love talking with husband and wife teams because they typically get it. But what's the real difference between that you've seen anyway in a husband and wife team that the whole practice rallies behind versus a husband and wife team where the team is looking to get out because maybe the wife, who's the office manager, is like a demon,
Right.
or
Or
vice
the husband.
versa, right? So I'm sure you've seen this, and like what are the traits that are different between those two dynamics?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, whether it's a husband wife team or two doctors, the vision has to be clear. And I'm a big believer of that. As an owner of a practice, you need to be there to help your team be successful, not tell your team what to do. So I've had those stories. I've been with practices. I had an office one time. The team pulled me aside and said, "Look, if the wife's here tomorrow, we all quit." That kind of thing. I mean, it's been that bad, literally. So I understand it. And whenever I find that there's a spouse in the practice that's not a doctor per se, um, I find that it can be challenging if she's not part of the team and trying to help. But my spouses in successful teams that are in the practice, I've got some male and female spouse practice runners. Um, they're there to make the life of the staff better, right? They're there to help. They're there to help jump in with the systems. there's nothing they won't do that they ask their team to do. So if I'm telling my team to go clean the restroom and I'm not willing to go clean the restroom, that's a problem. So it's that ownership mentality that they take. And again, as you know, Kirk, I'm sure you can't tell people what to do. You got to help them get what you want. Give them the tools.
Yeah, I know. I love this. I actually got this from Alex Hermosi, but he was creating a chart of like a diamond, right? And yeah, it's right. And now it's you know with teams and team members, we typically go directly to whether somebody wants to do something or not, right? But really, there's four other traits that really come down to like that we need to look at first before we get to the want, right? Or whether they're lazy or not, right? So because most people want to keep their job, right? So now if we look at it this way, it's like maybe they don't know what they need to do because we're not clear on what they need to do. Maybe they don't know how to do it. Okay. They literally just don't know how, like basically what you said is like they don't know how to do it. So you need to relay that and be clear. They may not have the resources to actually get it done efficiently. So we got to look at that. And then also they may not know when to do it. So I love that one because I've come across that so many times in the last few weeks of people just being poor time managers, right? And so they're not getting the job done because they don't know when to do it during the day that's the most effective for them to get it done.
Yeah. They feel like they're busy and asking them to do anything extra is overwhelming. And so, kind of going back on what you said, if you think about the priority in the pyramid, at the top, the most important person in the practice is the patient. The next is the team, and the doctor is at the bottom. And so you focus on the patient, you take care of the team, the doctor will be happy. The other thing that you mentioned about want, you think most people want, but I have learned over the years that want and need are a thin line, right? Not everybody wants to be successful. They need a job, right? Not everybody wants to be in dentistry. They need a paycheck. So when you can find the right staff, going back to the first story I told you about, the big flip, when you get a team that wants to be there and wants to help each other and wants to be successful, that's one thing. And you got a team that just needs a paycheck and is just showing up. That's another. And so it there's so many different ways we could go with this, Kirk, in the sense that, I relate this back to dentistry. If I look in your mouth or your wife looks in your mouth and she says, Kirk, you've got a crack fractured tooth with a large filling, you need a crown. Well, when I tell you what you need, you can say, no, I don't. You get pushback. Agree? Turn it around and say, Kirk, do you see this large filling? Do you see this crack? Do you want to avoid pain? Do you want to avoid discomfort? Then you're going to want me to do a crown. People will do more when you ask than when you tell. And when you appeal to what is it that they want. See, they don't need a filling or crown. They want out of pain. They don't need a filling or crown. They want to save time, money, and discomfort. So when you're approaching that with your team, what is it that you want? How do we help you get that? So when you go back to your when to do it, you want to give them the tools. Like one of the tools we like dental intel. I know you use that as well. So dental intel makes it easier for you to find patients, not just that are overdue for their cleaning, but also that need treatment, right? And that have a good show rate. When you have holes in the doctor's schedule, you give the team the tools to find unscheduled patients that need certain amount of work that prefer a Tuesday. So when you give them the tools to make their job easier, here's names to fill, cancellation, no-shows, here's how you use these tools, it makes the staff's job easier, less stressful. You give them things like Mango Voice to get rid of the overflow of the phones or things of that nature. You give the team the tools that's causing them frustration. They have a better job satisfaction. They're able then to focus more on the patient.
Yeah. And that's something that's kind of like a secondary form of leadership, right? So we as leaders buy back our time, right? How do we buy back our time? We buy back our time by hiring team members
To do it.
to do it, right? And so we trade time for money, right? But that's okay because then we can hire a great team to do the things that we need them to. But I take it a step further on the second form of leadership, which is buying back your team's time to what you're talking about now, where you're trying to figure out how to automate or delegate or outsource things that are on their plate. Me and Zach had a episode not too long ago talking about how the front office is just bombarded with so many things. They're wearing so many hats, just like the doctor in the back. And we need to buy back their time. So like we typically will outsource RCM altogether with a great company that does just that instead of five other things that are on their plate. And so they don't do that one thing really well. So now when you can get back into buying back your team's time, then your team is happier. They're not burning out because they can actually focus on the patient like you're talking about instead of the other five things they're trying to get to.
Yeah, and again, part of giving your team the tools, it's the right staffing levels to handle the volume. No staff wants to work through lunch and stay late and come in on extra days, and nobody wants that. And so when you give them the tools to, I'm big about eliminating the things that don't make you productive, right? The levers I want to switch are the levers that are going to cause your production and collection to go up. So if this task is just a task and it doesn't cause results, like even posting checks, right? It doesn't make you money. The money's already in the door, it's in the check, you just got to get there. So outsourcing that, the insurance verifications, things like that aren't patient facing, those are the kind of things that buy back that time for your team that you're talking about.
What is one thing or maybe multiple things that you see the dental profession is told, even from coaching consultants, whatever, or like maybe the industry in general, but the world tells practice owners that you actually disagree with?
Pretty much anything after you say the word can't,
Yeah.
right? You can't do this, you can't do that. And I know it sounds silly, but there's nothing you can't do. There's just things you won't do, right? And so now I've fallen into that trap myself. I get a doctor that has 4 treatment rooms and wants to do 1.6 million and, charges $700 for a crown. Okay, mathematically those numbers aren't going to work. But if you want to do that 1.7 or that 1.5, are you willing to add treatment rooms? Are you ready to add technology? Are you ready to raise your fees? Now you might say I'm not going to. That's them saying they can't, but they could. Um, what would it be? Well, that's a great question, and I don't know that there's a set thing because I'm not a believer in can't. I there's just things I won't do.
Right. I like so for I mean, with my background, we have a seven-figure practice only working 3 days or 3 days a week. I think it piggybacks off of what you said though, is like most people feel like they can't do it, right? But really it comes down to whether you want to or not. And I mean that really is because now instead of 4 days, if our goal is, $10,000 a day in order to hit our goals with 4 days a week, then we cut out a day, then it's like, it's 13.5 a day, you know? And that's all it is. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it takes an immense amount of leadership to push to that level where you can train a team and get the systems in place to also train the patients that 3 days a week is okay.
Right.
'Cause and then pushing past those limiting beliefs and thinking that, oh, well, you can't be as profitable as I am. Like, oh,
Watch me.
let me tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have a
That's that
47% profit
commercial or
margin.
whatever. Here, hold my beer. Let me show you.
I mean, it's really not that crazy, but it does surprise me a lot of times when, to me, even when I had coaches, it was just like, okay, cool. Yeah, you can pull this lever, you can pull this lever, you can pull this lever. Like all of us have levers we can pull to make profitability go up or whatever, performance go up. But something that I think is kind of a disconnect of what some coaches and consultants do, or just the world and industry in general say, is that here are the things that work. I'm like, yes, but does it give you the outcome that you actually want? So that's where I try to figure out what is the goal? Like what is the vision? What do you want to bring home? What are your goals? And then okay, cool. Now your practice is here. In order for you to hit that goal, then you have to reverse engineer that down to the day to figure out the practice schedule and training the team and the systems to do that. Then you can get to efficiencies and then increase profit margin, all these things. But like, there are so many levers that you could pull that just don't give you that outcome.
Kind of piggybacking on that and what you asked, there's one thing that I think holds this industry back. And I started playing around with this article. One of the things as a coach that I get frustrated with is I get frustrated for my teams or doctors when they're okay with being just okay. And what I think hold people back, there are things, you and I both, right? There are things you want to get done this week, Kirk. Are there things you have to get done this week?
Yes, 100%.
And some of those won't get off of either list, right? There's things you want to do, you won't. There's things you have to do, you won't. What I have found is the factor that changes that is what I call the bad enough factor. Until you want it bad enough or have to bad enough, it's not going to change. And I think a lot of doctors get in their own way because they want it, but they're not willing to do the work. They have to change, but they get stuck in that loser's limp mentality to where I can't do this, I can't do this. Well, you've heard it said, either you think you can, you think you can't, either way you're correct. So you've got to change that mentality and get that bad enough factor. And once you have the bad enough factor, you can't stop a team from getting there.
Correct. And that's where, you gotta, I think, like, personally, I love talking to people with, without them being clients and stuff, because they ask great questions sometimes where it's like, okay, cool. What does it take to do what you're talking about? I will be happy to tell you what it takes. It takes X, Y, Z. So now you get to make a intelligent, knowledgeable decision on whether or not you want to do what it takes to get to that level.
And want to and willing to are even a fine line. I want to do it, but I don't want to put in an extra hour of training my team, or I don't want to. So you got to be willing to as much as you got to be wanting to.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. And with all the practices you've worked with, if you never coached another practice again, it's like, let's say tomorrow you walked out the door. What is one thing you would most want practice owners and managers to know before you walked out that door?
How important it is to give your team the tools and systems to take you to success. So if you've got a team that's motivated, motivate your team, take care of them, give them the tools, i.e., the systems. They should be taking care of you. You take your care of your patient through your team, right? Your team treats your patients friendly, polite, courteous all the time. They follow up, they're on time. You give your team the tools and systems to be successful, they're going to take care of you forever, which I think is why a lot of my clients have been with me 30 years. I don't know about you, but I don't have office hours. I answer my phone. Phone rings. I carry it all the time. I answer it. Hey, can you talk? Yeah, I'm not at dinner. Might as well. People, I have friends in this business that have hours and appointments and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, when do you want to meet? If I don't have something else going on. So make your patients a priority, make your staff a priority, make sure they're making the patient a priority, and long term you'll be successful.
Even going beyond that, right? It's creating the systems that are so dummy proof that they're plug and play.
Well, the systems are easy. You know that. It's getting the team to follow the systems and find the time.
Correct. And now that's a system of itself, right? It's like,
And that's where coaches like you and I come in because,
yes.
Tiger Woods, nobody could beat him at golf, or at least, there was a time, or Michael Jordan in basketball or whatever, but they all had coaches
Yeah.
to improve their technique. So, that's where coaches like yourself, myself, we help team with these systems. We help doctors. We come alongside them to help them accomplish, their goals.
Yeah.
So take care of your team, implement your systems, and you're gonna succeed. Now, maybe not to the levels that you want, but that's the foundation that if I were stepping away, I would say make sure you got a happy team and great systems.
Yeah. What's the number one P&L mistakes that you see?
Ooh,
Because,
not
like, for instance, let's just say this scenario, okay? You could go through this. So this could be a long talk, but let's just keep it short. So,
I did this yesterday, so this is on top of my mind.
okay, great, great. So let's say we have a practice that on paper is profiting, but is not cash flowing, right? So you don't have cash at the end of the month, but on paper your accountant's like, dude, you're profiting so good. And you're just like, I don't know where it's going because it's not in my account. What do you do?
That's kind of a loaded question, but I know where you're going with it. You know, if you're cash flowing well in your practice on your P&L, enough numbers fall into the bottom line, then it's your lifestyle that is draining you from having money. You go out and you buy the new car and the big house and you're taking the trips and you have no money left over month to month, but yet your practice is pulling out, let's say 40%. That 40% doesn't pay your lifestyle, right? But 40% profit is a good number, right? I think the number one mistake most doctors don't do with their P&L is they don't look at it quickly to be reactive. The P&L that I looked at yesterday, a practice of mine down in Palm Beach, um, they had the totals but not the percentages. So they got their P&L for the month with all the numbers related to collection. And what I told the doctor, you got to get this timely and you got to have it as a percentage of, right? And then you want the same month compared to the same month the year before and the same quarter the same year. Get that all onto one spreadsheet. Then understand what are the normal industry standards, but forget that for a moment. What are your standards, right? What are your numbers? So, the number one typical expense is salaries. So you want to make sure. Now, I believe that your team cannot be paid enough, but they may not be doing enough to make the numbers high enough to where it's in line, which is why we have ownership mentality that we talked about. So controlling, your top 5 or 6 expenses and seeing where they're out of line and then reacting quickly. The P&L I looked at yesterday, his rent is way out of line by industry standards. On top of that, they're building around his practice. The same landlord, they have no parking for their patients. So patients that are older or handicapped, they can't even get to the front door to drop people off. So I told him, call your landlord, see if he'll make a rent, adjustment during the time of construction. So not looking at your P&L and not looking at it as a percentage, because if you grabbed your P&L and you just saw supplies were 10,000, well, what percentage is that? Or your salaries were 15,000, what percentage is that? So, and then doing something about it. I think most doctors look at it, they don't spend the time to really see where am I online and then try to make adjustments.
Then when you understand the P&L, this is actually one thing I did at the retreat this last weekend was, understanding the P&L and that who is tied, like who on the team is tied to that, right? But then looking at your KPIs in your practice and understanding that all those numbers are tied to a person,
Right.
and that how, like, you can manipulate that number by then training that person if you know who to go to. But the P&L and like keeping that in line and how much you spend and don't spend is a system in and of itself,
Right.
right? Like keeping your supplies at 3.5%. Everybody's like, how in the world do you do that? I'm like,
Without running
discipline.
out.
Yeah, discipline. Like, you don't spend so much when you have a thing come in, a special come in that's buy 5 blocks, get 5 free. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need them.
Don't buy 12 months worth of gloves because they were on sale.
Right. Well, okay. Hold on. I'm going to push back on that one.
All right. Well,
Okay.
if you've got enough storage and it makes sense,
Yes,
okay.
and your numbers are in line. So, for
Correct.
instance, if I've gone through, it's always in like September, Black Friday, like November or so, where Top Quality Gloves will do 30% off of the gloves that we like. They don't do it any other time of the year. So what we'll do is we'll keep our expenses in line to where even if I spend 12 months worth of gloves,
You're still in line.
I'm still in line.
That makes sense.
So I'm okay with that one.
I picked the wrong product, but the concept is still there, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're
But
buying, let's say you're buying etch or something like that that's
yeah,
going to expire before you use it.
yeah,
Those are the kind of foolish things. I mean,
yeah,
I've gone into offices and open up cabinets and things, and they got so many vials of this and tubes of that and expirated
yeah,
this and that. And, one assistant uses one tube, one uses another, things like that. Those are those are cost control, and as you said, that's discipline.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kelly, this has been a fun episode. I know we need to catch up more. This is a lot of fun. But guys, this has been another great episode of Management Unfiltered. Make sure you hit the YouTubes. Make sure you subscribe. Give us a 5-star. Let us know how we did and also what you would like to hear next. I'm sure we'll have Kelly on in the future. Make sure to hang out at conferences. Kelly, what conferences are you going to be at this year?
So I do go to the shows. I go to the Hinman. I go to the Chicago Midwinter. I do Dental Intel Summit. Sometimes I'll go down to Florida. I don't usually display at the booth unless I'm speaking. But I just in the background as I have for 30 years of dentistry's best kept secret, if you will. But I would love you to follow my website. I post blogs every month and social media. There's always things that were going on, but you can find everything at kellyschwartz.com.
Perfect. Yeah, because he's a wealth of knowledge, guys. I mean, even as a young lad myself, getting into coaching and consulting, he's been so great to me. So I appreciate you, Kelly. But guys, it's been another great episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, all the things, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.
Bye.
Come on, give me some. Yeah.